I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Robin?
I move approval of the agenda with the HR addendum.
Thank you. Paul?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Strategic Plan in Action, Celebrating Success. We have some guests here from the Work Experience Program. Is that Dr. Gross?
Yes, thank you very much. Tonight for our Celebrating Success, what we wanted to do is give a highlight of the Work Experience Program here in the Fargo Public Schools. We have 3 staff members and a student with us tonight to share some information. And I'd like to turn it over to Patty Cummings, who is our Director of Special Education. She will introduce the rest of the team and begin the presentation. So.
Thank you, Bob. How wonderful to be here. Thank you. We appreciate this opportunity to share what we believe is a very exciting and growing program in our district. As it was indicated, it is called the Work Experience Education Program. If you know special education, you know we like acronyms. We often refer to it as the WEE program, W-E-E. I have with me tonight, and if they would come up here, Mari Wanzik, who is our teacher, and Jolene Shu, who is the Area Service Coordinator extraordinaire for this program. And I am not going to try to pretend that I know everything about it and let them just take over.
First of all, we'd like to thank you, the Board of Education, for allowing us this opportunity to talk about this amazing program that we have in our school district. To begin with, our program has been in existence since 2002, and the purpose and mission of the program is to assist our students with disabilities in obtaining and maintaining competitive employment. Currently, the school district funds $30,000 to support this program. And this past July, the WIOA Act, which is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, was passed and signed into Congress. And with that, we applied for and have received a grant through this program through the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. We were the first school district in the state to receive $148,000 that we are able to utilize to support our students with the needs of obtaining and maintaining competitive employment. And we were also asked to present at the Secondary Interagency Transition Conference in November, and the Director of Vocational Rehabilitation for the state said that Fargo is blazing the trails and leading the way in this new development and opportunity for our students.
So currently at Fargo Public Schools, we have 2 programs that are running under the Work Experience, and the first is the Pre-Employment Transition Services. This allows us to work with students who have IEPs and disabilities to begin to develop their skills with vocational positions. So lots of times we'll have them come in, work with me on what is a resume, how do you do an interview. We have job coaches that can come in and work with them, learning the different stages of their positions. Some of these students are not currently employed. They are doing volunteer work, starting at the base of where the student is at, what are their needs, what are they comfortable with. Some of them are working in the schools. Some of them go out to other schools, and some of them go out to the community. We start where the student is at, and we move forward from there, which is really nice because that hasn't always been the case. One of the things that WIOA has allowed us to do is start with students in the 9th grade, which also matches when their IEPs go to transition. So that is a really nice aspect of that. The second one that we have is the Work Experience. This is for our students with IEPs who are competitively employed in the community. They have gone out, they have gotten a job. With both of these programs, we track the work they do with us, the work they do with any community providers, kind of the extra stuff, and then the hours that they volunteer and or work, and we provide elective credit for high school. Just to give you a little bit of a background, we mentioned WIOA already. Last spring, we started having conversations with the Department of Public Instruction about where our funding was going to come in for the summer. And they suggested, you know, there's this new federal mandate coming down to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Why don't you start talking to them? And so Fargo Public and VR and our community provider, Community Living Services, started having some pretty serious conversations about how are we going to serve these kids? What are we going to do with them? It was really a neat experience because, as we said before, we started in 2002, but it kind of allowed us to pick the best of everything we had done and then marry that with the new federal regulations and create this new, what we would call a pilot project. So this is just discussing some of what we found at the end of the summer. We had 31 semester credits earned from students in both that pre-ETS program as well as the work experience program. Fargo Public was very generous in providing me as the teacher, and then we used the funding that we received to do the job coaching and develop job community work sites and those kinds of things. So it was really a neat experience.
We have both programs implemented in all 4 of our high schools. Currently, we serve over 50 students, a combination of both the pre-employment transition services as well as the work experience services. And under Woodrow Wilson High School, we do have NA, not applicable for work experience, as they do have work experience as part of their own program at Woodrow Wilson High School. And next, we would like to talk to our student that we have here. We have Logan, who is a Fargo South student. He had interned at the ARC this past year with the Pre-Employment Transition Services Program, and he is known to be the youngest intern and the only intern to be hired, as he currently is competitively employed with the ARC. And recently, you may recognize him as he was featured in a fundraising campaign with the ARC. And this is a little video of Logan in action at his job at the ARC.
I started at DR December, June 1st, right after school started as an intern. I got experience in everything retail-wise, from putting stuff out to helping in the back room. I've helped on the truck, both semi and help the delivery person. One of the personal best things that I've been able to do is go on truck for my birthday.
Why did you like that, Logan?
Because I was never able to go on before then, and I really haven't been on much since, mostly due to school.
Can you share with us a little bit of maybe your favorite parts of your job? Want to share with the group here what your favorite thing about working is?
One of the things I mentioned was I actually got to go on the truck for the first time for my birthday. Best birthday present I've ever gotten. Everyone there is great. We need more volunteers other than community service.
Anything else you want to share, Logan?
Not that comes to mind.
That's good.
So just in closing, Logan's parents are also here tonight, and Karen was nice enough to write us a letter when we went to go to do our Bismarck presentation. And these were just some of the snippets that she mentioned out of her letter, and I don't normally read my slides word for word, but it's so powerful. I just want you to hear from a parent's perspective what they found. We have started to see a change in Logan. He has matured, more financially responsible with his money, and in fact, he's a bit of a tightwad. He looks forward to going to work each and every shift. They offered a part-time position after he finished his internship, and they work around his school schedule and allow for him to participate in Special Olympics. Logan is much more independent as well. Due to bus training, he knows the bus routes and schedules and is great at time management. He prides himself on not being late for work. The work programs offered by Fargo Public Schools have been a blessing to our son and our family. It gave him the confidence that he needed from someone other than his parents and family to spread his wings and try something new and to challenge himself. He has amazed us with his dedication to his job as well as raising his grades in school.
We again would like to thank you for this opportunity and presenting about this program that we both feel so passionate and excited about and to be a part of. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Logan, for coming to talk with us tonight. Does anybody have any questions or anything to add? Thanks so much for all the good work you do. It was very inspiring. Thanks. At this time, we have recognition of the audience. There was no one signed up to speak, but is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board this evening? Okay. We have a guest report this evening from the Development Foundation. And who is?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Becky Bakke. I am the new Executive Director of the Fargo Public Schools Foundation, and I'm here tonight to give you just some brief updates about the 2014-15 annual report and some highlights of the things we've done in our past fiscal year, and also update you on some current happenings at the foundation. Last fiscal year, we were able to provide 44 innovative education grant projects totaling over $54,000. These projects range from anything from funding for musical instruments in the classroom to helping make innovative field trip happen, as well as supporting literacy education. We also were able to provide 104 scholarships for graduating seniors that totaled over $95,000. These come from established foundation endowment funds, from annual scholarship funds, and from the Dollars for Scholars program. I think it's important to note this, however, there's a significant monetary impact on these kids. I think it goes beyond that. I think it sends a message that we have faith and confidence in these young adults and that we're ready to support them to continue their education. I think that makes just as big of an impact, and you can see that difference. We also oversee the Fargo Public Schools Adopt-a-School program. This matches businesses with with schools. It matches businesses and community organizations with schools in the district. Last year, we established 21 Adopt-a-School partners. We're striving to have a partner for every school. What these partnerships do is bring business employees and community organization members into the schools to assist with reading programs, tutoring, present career awareness presentations. They help with special events, mentoring, extracurricular clubs. They help with joint community service projects, field trips, lunch buddies, just a wide gamut of things. Each business meets with the school and they decide what's the best impact they can make on the kids. We also continue to operate the Fargo Public Schools Alumni Network. We've been providing resources and connections for Fargo Public Schools alum. We help reunion organizers each year, and we also publish an alumni newsletter. Those are kind of some of the highlights from the last year's annual report. Current things that are happening, like I mentioned, we continue to support the Adopt-a-School partnerships. We've added 2 new partnerships recently. We've added the Heat Transfer Warehouse group. They partner with McKinley Elementary, and we've added Essentia Health, who partners with Ed Clapp Elementary. Past fall, we had our first Innovative Education Grant Round. We had, I believe, 28 grants submitted, and we were able to fund a total of 15 of them for almost $14,000. And we're currently taking applications for the current upcoming spring grant round, which are due February 1st. In In addition to that, we also have the Eleanor Lang Law Literacy Grant Round in progress. Those are due March 31st, and they support literacy education in the schools. And this grant round will be for the 2016-17 school year. I'm excited to say we're heading into our third year of participating in Giving Hearts Day. And this is a online giving campaign that is supported by Dakota Medical Foundation and the Impact Foundation. We raise money through this for the milk program. And this year, Dakota Medical Foundation gave us a $1,000 match grant for that day. And we were also able to secure another $9,000 in match, so that we have $10,000 available that day for match. So our hope is to get that matched and raise $20,000 for the milk program. Finally, we had our 4th annual Fargo Public Schools Alumni and Friends Breakfast. That will be held on Tuesday, April 22nd at the Ramada Plaza and Suites. It starts at 7:15 with the program starting at 7:30. We're really excited to have special guests this year, and also a Fargo North alum, 2000, Joe Bommersbach. You might know him as Blind Joe. So he's willing to come and be our special guest and present on his experience as a Fargo Public School student and how it's impacted his career. Again, thank you very much for letting me give you this brief presentation on what's happening with the foundation.
Thank you very much, Becky, and for the good work you do. Anybody have any questions for Becky or any comments? This is great. We appreciate all the good work and all the contributions so very much.
Together make a big impact, and it's a great job to have and a great position to be in. Thank you for your time.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for this nice report, too. Staff reports. Are we going to start with Brock? Okay.
Madam President, members of the board, this evening we're going to hear a report on progress being made, part one of a two-part report of the long-range facilities plan. This evening we're going to hear about the projects that the plan has helped us guide through over the past year, and at the next board meeting, Dr. Schatz will bring you the annual review and the updated report of the long-range facilities plan. And so we do that as a two-part piece. Before I turn it over to Jim and his team, a couple of words of gratitude from me. First to the board, you guys have been very dedicated and steadfast to us as administration as we have made a commitment to our facilities and making sure we don't have the haves and have-nots. And we've done a good job of, the plan has done a good job of really guiding us through making sure we keep our facilities up to date, we maintain them, we make sure that we're trying to provide as much equity as possible throughout the district. And as we've worked to balance budgets, you guys have been very directive to us that we need to protect the dollars in the long-range facility plan and really committing to keeping our facilities up to speed. So I certainly appreciate that. And also then to Jim Free, the Director of Maintenance and Operation, and his team that's with him tonight, Kevin Hagnes, Mike Semenko, and Jeremy Wolf. As I've said to you before, when we've done presentations out of business services, I get to come to meetings twice a month and get a lot of accolades for what happens within the district. The reality is the real work happens with the team that I have that report to me. I was very fortunate to come here and inherit a quality team, and you're going to hear from them tonight. The reason that we get the compliments we get on our facilities, the reason our facilities are well maintained, they're well kept, the grounds are good, that we don't have repair bills that really can be a detriment to the budget, is that these four guys have provided great direction and leadership to that process. So I want to thank them and give credit to them for the work that they do, and thank you for your commitment to this plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim Free, and he will walk you through what's been going on in the last year with the long-range facilities plan.
Thank you, Brock. First of all, just so you know who these people are that Brock mentioned, Kevin, would you stand up? Kevin Hagnes is responsible for delivery and the grounds. He's a ground supervisor and delivery supervisor. He's responsible for something like 360 acres of grass, 35 miles of sidewalk, and 34 acres of parking lots. So it's a big job, and thank you. So really anything that moves on Fargo schools, he's responsible, from crayons to mail to food. So it's a big job, and thank you, Kevin. And then Mike Semenko, if you'd stand up. Mike's the custodial supervisor, and he has a lot of night activity to take care of with all the custodians working in the evenings, not all of them, but most of them. So thank you, Mike, for all your work on that. And also Jeremy Wolf, trades and electrical supervisor. He does wears many hats, electrical to intercoms to fire alarm systems to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, all that stuff. So thank you, Jeremy, for your hard work with that too. One of the things that that I felt very difficult is to look out 10 years, what is any of us going to be doing in 10 years from now? It's really hard to look really beyond. We're pretty accurate in 3 to 4 years, but when you start looking out longer than that, it's really difficult. So we have a 10-year plan, and we spaced out things that we think could happen, but you have to know that's an ever-changing plan. An example would be just this last fall, one of the guys got called in on a weekend, water in the tunnel at Ben Franklin, and here we found that a pipe was corroding, and when we got to checking, very many pipes were in the process of corroding. So now that all of a sudden wasn't on our plan, and that got to be pushed up to this summer. So there's an $80,000 project there that's going to have to be done this summer. But that's the type of things that happen. We find those, they're all buried in insulation, and you can't see some of the direct problems that are having. So anyway, just to know that it's an ever-changing plan. I just finished with the last school. We do an annual review with the principals, and that's how I get some of the information that we put on the plan. Sometimes there's program changes, like the tech ed areas in the middle schools are having a curriculum change, and they're doing some robotic type things. So now we have to take some measures to make sure that those programs are successful. They're going to need quite a bit of storage room for the totes that have the robots in, and some of the old camera equipment that's outdated now, that's not needed any longer, will be stored away, sent away, and we'll make room for these new changes. I just want to give you just a little list that people ask, what do you spend $2.8 million on? And it seems like a lot of money, but when you have a pool pack that costs $400,000 or $500,000, it can go pretty quick. But in 2016, I'm just going to read off a list of some of the things that we did with that money. McKinley got re-windowed. Hawthorne got re-windowed. Kennedy, the site lighting, even though it's a pretty new school, out there with the wind is shaking the lighting fixtures and causes them to fracture. And of course, it was a year beyond warranty. Of course, you know how that goes. So anyway, we had to fund the whole thing, but they got new site lighting out there. Pool pack at South, Hawthorne roof, Discovery heat pumps, Centennial siding, South High roof replacement, one of the sections anyway. South High Tech Ed needed some updating. One of the reports that when some surveyors went through is they thought we could do a better job with some air quality with the welding areas. So we took that under advisement, and we looked at it, and we hired an engineer, and he came up with a really good, better way to capture all that air rather than breathing it. So the students are really working in a healthy environment. Then we, of course, updated the lighting and painted the building in the inside, and that turned out real well. We took out 3 underground fuel tanks that were in the ground. We thought it's time to get rid of them. If you remember with the air conditioning projects that we did a couple years ago, those tanks are no longer needed. So we just took those out before they started leaking and caused a bigger hazard years down the road. Discovery had its irrigation updated. We had to restain the Trollwood Amphitheater arches that were being sun-baked out there and needed to be done. North High had a large carpet project in the corridors. We decided to put natural gas at Davies before we were using propane. You can't believe how much propane a swimming pool uses. It's unbelievable. So we just thought this is going to be a really quick payback. So we went ahead and bit the bullet and just had the natural gas out there. And then the Lincoln portable relocation and assembly there with that. And then some of the things that are coming up, oh, and by the way, we did squeeze in Ed Clapp and the Eagles in amongst all that work too. So that got done. Also 2017, just some roof stuff that's anticipated, or projects. Hawthorne roof was completed this year. It was a split between a couple years there. Discovery heat pumps is a work in progress. South High is going to be getting carpeting this year. Hawthorne is going to get a playground. Lincoln's going to get an updated playground. carpeting projects at Lewis and Clark, fire alarm upgrades at multiple schools. South High has another section that's going to get redone. That's a very large roof. Agassiz is going to have some block and brick repair. Agassiz will get a new clock, a wireless clock system. Jefferson needs to have the educational wing repainted. Lincoln roof, Roosevelt lockers, electrical distribution panels in assorted schools, some paving projects, some casework, and the list goes on. And then again, too, we did squeeze an operations center in there too, so that'll get done. So if I know what's good for me, it'll get done. So, all right. One thing that we are trying to work on a little better is, I don't know if we really have a full handle of gym floor replacements. You know, as you know, they can be sanded 5 times sometimes, and the records aren't really good at how many times they have been sanded. So we just sort of are working through that, trying to figure out what replacement cycle that's on. Obviously, those are very expensive floors. We just did one at Ben Franklin, and that's not a huge floor, but that was about $90,000, $95,000 there. So we're trying to get a better handle on that. Then also the parking lot replacement maintenance. We have a plan, but I think we're just slowly working on that, trying to fine tune those two things. I don't feel like we're right there yet, but we're getting there. So, any questions at all?
Any questions for Jim? That's amazing.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Okay.
Dr. Schatz?
Well, I just wanted to make one comment, and that is, you, like Brock said, next time around, you'll get the updated long-range facility plan. It'll be going into its 4th year, and it is tracking perfectly. You know, everything we talked about when we first put that group together to talk about how do we plan for the future, this 10-year plan that Jim talks about, and all the other aspects that go into that. And so it has really given us a nice blueprint. And 2 years ago, we reorganized the department too, and have these 3 gentlemen now heading up those areas, working with Jim through Brock. And not only are they effective, but they're efficient, and every dollar spent is spent very well and effectively. And so by having that plan and being able to do those things, we're able to carry out all these things. And so our facilities are in as good a shape as they've probably ever been, and will be as we continue to work through this. And then, like Jim says, the additional projects we've had and the management and the oversight and all those things. So I'm very pleased with what I've seen materialize through the years with that plan, and very proactively. And so you should feel very good about what's happening and know that you're in good hands, and this group is doing tremendous work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schatz. And I just, once again, just to know that, you know, the work that you do is often, no one notices it until something goes wrong. So it must feel like a thankless job sometimes, but thank you so much for keeping all of our facilities in such great shape, and so that the teachers and the kids have what they need. So we
Thank
really
you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Sure.
Thanks. Nice. FEA report, David.
Hello, happy 2016, everyone. Good to see you again. We'll be starting with the district, the calendar committee for 17-18 here shortly, which is hard to believe, but that's coming around soon. Of course, we're looking at the Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association. Court case started yesterday with dues for unions, so we'll be watching that and see how that turns out. On February 6th, North Dakota United is having advocacy and a bargaining conference, so we'll be recruiting our current leaders and future leaders to attend that. And we'll also be going to a few leadership conferences throughout the one in San Francisco and one in Dallas in the future, next about month or so. So hopefully get some good ideas from them, and hopefully build some new leaders for FEA. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions for David? Heading off to warm places. Okay, we are now at the consent agenda. Robin?
I move approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anne Marie?
It's not a roll call vote, but could you please verify if Jennifer is on the line or not? I thought I heard her beep in.
Oh, thanks. Jennifer, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Okay, consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. It is approved. So on to business. We have a couple bond authorizations. Jim?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll first reference you over to memo number 78, which is the first of two actions we're bringing forward for board consideration this evening. Memo number 78 outlines the bond sale of $9.5 million of limited tax school building bonds for the purpose of the addition and remodeling that's going on currently over at the Eagles Elementary Building. There are two parts to this motion that we're going to put forward. As you all recall, we authorized the start of this process back in October, which opened up a window for protest period. There were no protests received during the 60-day protest period. So one part of this resolution that's going to come forward in a moment will be to attest to the fact that no protests were provided or filed during the protest period. The second half of this particular motion that I'm going to be making would then authorize the public sale of $9.5 million of limited tax school building bonds, Series 2016A, and an accompanying resolution that would provide for participation in the School Bond Credit Enhancement Program and the notice of the bond sale. The School Bond Credit Enhancement Program is a tool that allows us to actually issue the bonds at a lower interest rate than normally would be in the marketplace. So we'll take this one first, and I'll put forward a motion that we adopt a resolution determining that no protests were filed and adopt the resolution providing for the public sale of $9.5 million of limited tax school building bonds, Series 2016, and for participation in the School Bond Credit Enhancement Program, and provide the notice for the bond sale.
Second.
Just so everybody's aware, and I think most of you are, this doesn't mean we automatically accept what comes back in the bids. If we authorize this action, Brock will then be in contact with our bond folks. They'll put it out for bid. Those bids will come back in, and it'll come back before the board to accept those offers, assuming we get the interest rates we're looking for in that process. So this action is not the final action. This is just, I guess, the second step. The first was to put out the protest period. This is the second step. Then it'll go to bid. We'll see what comes back in, and we'll either accept the bond bid at that point in time or reject it.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Anne Marie?
Knutson?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Benson?
Yes.
Goldenberg?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Boyd?
Yes. And the next one, please.
Thank you. I'd reference you over to memo number 82 in your packet. And just a little background, last year, 2015, we started a process of doing a refund bond issue to ultimately replace some of the indebtedness that the district took on in its building fund in relationship to the building of Davies. As we indicated at that time when we did the initial amount of refunding, that we would be coming back once we got to 2016 with a second part to this refunding issue. And the reason we split it into two was we wanted to make sure that we stayed within the parameters to have what they call bank qualified bonds, which again would get us a lower interest rate in the marketplace because that has a higher level of assurance to the bond holders that in fact they're going to get paid back not only their interest but ultimately their principal. So we're coming to you today with part two of that refund issue. This particular one will provide for the public sale of $16,785,000 of limited tax school building refund bonds, Series 2016B. And the estimate, and it's pretty close, but until we'd actually put this out, get bids back in, and then accept the bids, same process as we're going to be doing with the bonds related to the construction of the Eagles Elementary, it's estimated this refunding portion of this 16.78 will ultimately save the district approximately $2.2 million in the total cost of interest associated with this indebtedness. So that will help us to have increased capacity in the building fund if we need it, and certainly help us in terms of our overall expenses in terms of understanding the capital structure inside the building fund itself. So with that, I'll put forward a motion that we adopt a resolution providing for the public sale of $16,785,000 of limited tax school building refund bonds, Series 2016B, and adopt the resolution providing for participation in the school bond credit enhancement program as well.
Motion and a second. Any questions? Robin?
When these bonds are let, do you expect any difference in the interest rates with the feds just raising those rates recently?
No, I think that's already been kind of factored into the bond markets, and certainly the folks that we work with on the bonds have already factored that in. That's why I said we're estimating the savings at a little more than 2.2 million. The hard number we'll know for sure once we see what the bids come back in at.
Anyone else? Anne Marie?
Myers,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Strand,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes, motion carries. And thank you, Jim and Brock and Planning Committee for this. Appreciate it. Board compensation. As you know, once a year we take up the issue of board compensation. And the last time this came before us, it was recommended to governance to use this opportunity to take a look at some comparisons of not only other school districts, but other political subdivisions as well. We did that as a committee, and we are there was no recommendation that came out of governance for any change at this time. So I would entertain a motion, if anyone is, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a motion to present, and I will pass a piece of paper out, then I'll make my motion, and then open discussion, if that would be okay.
Certainly. Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the board. You know, this is my 8th year on the school board and my final term on the board. And every year I've been here, it sometimes becomes somewhat of a contentious issue. And it's a difficult issue, this notion that a sitting board of commissioners or board members is to weigh in on their own salaries. It becomes complex, and it becomes hard to get it's unwieldy at times. And now, being as I'm wrapping up my term, I'm sharing simply with my peers on the board my best advice going forward, and for those of you who will be serving in the future. And hopefully my efforts will be one of a resultant in somewhat of a mediated approach to this topic that will diffuse it properly so, and it will reflect a fair approach going forward, and it'll reflect a community standard that I want to share with us. So yes, we do have information on what others do in government subdivisions in our region, but there's one more thing they do that I would like to advance as a proposal when I make this motion. And that is the Cass County Commission, the West Fargo Public Schools District, the North Dakota Legislature, and to a very high degree, almost similarly, but with some little differences, the city of Fargo and others across the state. And they've all had the same issues of this topic when it comes up of, oh, how in the heck are you going to vote for raising your own wages? You know, and the ripple effects of that topic. So they've, before us, modified their approach such that they simply pass on, generally speaking, to the sitting commissioners or board members a similar or identical across percentage increase, if there's an increase, that is reflected in what the staff got. And so if the staff gets a 2% increase, that's what goes to the commissioners or to the board members. If they get a 3%, so there it is. This has been in effect, but to my knowledge, for 4 less sessions with the legislature. It's been in effect for 6 years, to my knowledge, with the West Fargo School District. In fact, the motion I'm presenting is really a morphed version of the West Fargo motion that they had passed, and with some advice from some Cass County folks, just a little bit of extra wording in there to consolidate the two into one motion. So, again, this isn't a hill to die on. It's just my best advice for future board members, and I would be honored if, or feel like I've made a contribution if down the road going forward, it diffuses some of that notion of you raised your own wages, or you wait so many years, you finally make a correction, then it seems abrupt. And it also reflects a mirroring of community standards of our peers. So that said, I move that board compensation shall be increased annually by a percentage that is equivalent to the across-the-board average percentage increase provided to all other staff effective July 1, 2016.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Discussion.
I have a question. This is Jen.
Go ahead.
So I think you make some good points, John, but if we're talking also about community standards and looking at what some of the other offices do, when I look at the differences here in number on board, perhaps we should be also having the same conversation, in all fairness to our constituents, in terms of, looking at comparators. If we're looking at size and numbers on board, perhaps that should also be involved in this conversation.
Robin?
First, I will comment on John's research. Thank you for doing that research. I didn't realize that, I only thought it was just I think the Park District is on the same system as what you mentioned as well. I did not realize the state legislature nor the Cass County Commission was based upon that. Jennifer, as far as a 9-member board, that would have to be a GAC issue because that is in North Dakota Century Code. So if you would like to refer that to GAC, no? Yes? Go ahead.
Members of the board, I believe in the last session, there was allowance for a broader ability to determine that. You are correct, Robin. At one point, specific to Fargo was a 9-member board, but that was changed in statute to the best of my knowledge in the last session.
Thank you.
Dinah? Are you done, Robin?
Yep.
Dinah?
Just further to this 9-member board thing, I thought this was raised a few years ago too, and unless, Brock, this changed as well, it's something that the board itself can't change. It has to come from a community member, because we did some research about that when it was raised before, that maybe we should, anyway, it
Is this
doesn't,
germane?
yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm just curious if we could, I don't think that affects our decision about whether we follow John's motion. And I guess I also find the research interesting, and I think that I agree that every year we discuss this, and every year it's more uncomfortable. And in the past, there have been proposals to raise it by X number of dollars or whatever, and it all seems in an individual time like a lot of money if you just do it once every X number of years. And for the amount of salary we make, a 1 or 2 or 3% increase is not very much money at one time. And so if the rest of the board is comfortable with this, then I'm comfortable with this as a way to sort of end this long-term uncomfortable situation.
Paul?
And I would simply echo some of Dinah's comments and John's comments, and that is, I think it takes a fair amount of courage to bring forward a motion like this, because it does engender some kind of controversy and commentary. And what I like about John's motion is that it removes a lot of that and simply makes it a function of what we do with the rest of the employees in the district, and it also mirrors what's going on in other offices throughout the community. And, you know, as someone who has looked at ways to compare things in my own business and in life, and long ago when I was a teacher, you can always find ways to compare things. And what you choose to compare it to will often prejudice your response and your answer. There are a lot of other things we could have compared our salaries to, not just other school districts, not just other elected offices, but the work involved, the salaries of other people who are a part of this district compared to other people who are parts of other districts. There's a lot of things that it could be compared to. So I think this does a great job of honing in on what needs to be done, and perhaps it's something that we could get behind, particularly because it won't impact many of us.
Rebecca.
Thank you, John, for the information. And last year, when I had the opportunity to discuss this for the first time as a board member, I was uncomfortable, like we all are, just with the discussion coming up, but I was specifically uncomfortable because I didn't have anything to base it on. And so there was a request to provide some comparisons so that we could hopefully have a little bit more to, again, to base it on and to make our decisions and our judgments. So what I like about this is that it provides us with a measured formula that is set forth so that we have a process to move forth. So thank you.
Anyone else? So the motion before us is what you have here. I do have a question for you, John. So a percentage, first of all, I imagine we could come up with something that's similar to whatever, I mean, teachers get one salary and sometimes administration or other staff gets a different percentage, whatever. How do you see this playing out as the school district and school board members enter into negotiation with teachers? In essence, we would be, is there any discomfort in negotiating what will be our own percentage increase as well?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I really appreciate that question. And the topic has been raised before that, well, is this a conflict of interest? When you are effecting change that will be reflected in your own payment or compensation. But that conflict of interest is upon our shoulders, to my knowledge, by statute. And it's no different than if it is a conflict. I don't think it is. In fact, I think it's less conflicting if we have a formula that's predetermined for future boards. And of course, they can always change that. But it's less conflicting if it's just formulaic and clear. But, you know, I suppose somebody could raise the issue of, well, you know, you shouldn't really vote on this, but it's a requirement of a board to do this. It was a requirement of the Cass County Commission. It was a requirement of the West Fargo Public Schools School Board. It was a requirement of the legislature took it upon themselves. I'm assuming it was a requirement for them to affect their own compensation packages. The city of Fargo, which uses COLA, a cost of living adjustments formulaically, they do it too, and it becomes much simpler. And if there's a question for implementation, and I know, and I like that this isn't reinventing the wheel. It's nothing new. I'm just simply sharing with us an opportunity to learn from what others do. But I do know in my visits with county and city and West Fargo schools and with a representative of the legislature who reached out to officials in Bismarck that I don't know that any of them would go back. And I know from your position, Brock, Mark Lemire has 6 years experience of, it's pretty simple. He says it's pretty cut and dry. You know, absolutely cut and dry and simple. And one of the comments that was made by one of the people I talked to is he said, well, nobody wants to vote on their own wages compensation package every year. But another piece of advice, as long as I'm just sharing, one of our county representatives, and it's former school board member, I believe Rick Steen's in the room, but he said you need to also acknowledge that there might be a point where, and I talked with the county commission chairman as well, but there might be a point where you look at the bigger picture, and I didn't quite understand what that meant until I talked with Mark Lemire at the West Fargo Public Schools, and he used the words, occasionally a board will reset things. So like the West Fargo schools recently reset their base compensation package, but continued forward with the approach of annual adjustments, cost of living adjustments and so on, escalations annually that reflect what's across with the staff. But I suppose if the economy went different directions, it would behoove any elected officials to consider resetting their base wages for everybody maybe, relative to the state of the economy. So that's maybe a little beyond your question there, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Jim?
Well, I got three thoughts, actually. Number one, I certainly agree that it is never fun to have a discussion about what we should be paid for doing what we're elected to do. And that's the really neat thing about this motion. We'll just get a raise without ever talking about it again. So in the interest of public transparency, this kind of disconnects from that. That all being said, we're talking 20, maybe a $30 annual adjustment. So it's not like we're trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. But I actually think the conversation is of value. And this takes the conversation right out of the equation. Your concern about how does this play into the negotiated agreement, I certainly can appreciate that thought process, because at the end of the day, that is something we are statutorily required to do, negotiate with our teachers. We then, based upon the recommendation from our superintendent, address the rest of our staff. And somehow I think we can come up with a mathematical average of those numbers. I would hope that in future collaborative bargaining negotiation sessions with the teacher group, this will not be the driving decider for the board, nor do I think it is going to be. So while I don't like to ever have something automatically set, I don't think that's going to disrupt the negotiations process a great deal. My bigger question or concern, well, actually the first one is a concern. This takes transparency out of the equation. But my bigger concern is it would assume that the $1,000 a month is the appropriate number for us to start with. As you referenced, John, they kind of reset, at least out in West Fargo. We obviously have not reset for quite a while, nor am I suggesting we need to. But if, in fact, we all felt that the current board compensation was the correct number, then putting a COLA adjustment on it that this kind of becomes might be a more palatable thing in my mind. But I worry about the fact that we're not even going to talk about this going forward if we pass this. It'll just be an autopilot thing.
Dinah?
I didn't see anything in the motion that says we don't talk about it every year. I mean, right now, it's still part of our routine. I would assume that it would still be on our agenda and our routine agenda every January. But perhaps the conversation isn't going to be so much about the percentage or whether there's an increase, but whether there's a need to change the base. And so I think we should continue to talk about it, but it might not be as much of an uncomfortable issue every year if we have this in place. So I mean, I agree with the motion, but I also agree that we should continue it on our agenda, so.
Rebecca?
I think we need to continue to talk about it if we are going to be following our policy. Because Board Policy 2P GP2E says in regard to the governing style and organization of the Board of Education was amended in September of 2009 to provide, quote, Board compensation will be reviewed annually during budget assumption discussions. So unless we would be changing our policy, I believe we still need to have some kind of a discussion about it.
Anyone else? Jim?
I would think if we adopt this motion, we're going to be changing our policy to come into compliance with this. That doesn't mean we won't still have the opportunity if we want to discuss it, but I would think we'd have to embed this in the policy for it to happen automatically.
Paul?
The topic of discussing it has never really been a problem for this board. We seem to find many issues that we spend a great deal of time discussing whether we take action or not. I think it's nice that John has put together a formula that's going to help provide some definition, some clarity, and on the contrary, I don't think it reduces transparency at all, because certainly every time we meet to discuss with our contracted employees, that receives a great deal of publicity and commentary, as well it should, and I think this will be a part of it. And, you know, it's not a huge deal, and it's, I think when you look behind the numbers and you ask yourself, for example, well, just how much is the unlimited use of Park District facilities for life really worth? It adds even more clarity to this program. So I like what John's brought up. I don't think it's a huge deal. I think we'll still have plenty of time to, or someone will have plenty of time to talk about this next year anyway.
Anyone else? I have a concern that I've not heard mentioned yet, and that is, even though at a 2% annual escalator at this point, we're only talking a few $100s, so it's more of an honorarium, it's more of a symbol, but I think symbols are important, especially when our state dollars are now frozen. And we are in the process of determining if, when, and how we will go back to the voters to get those local dollars unfrozen and reconnected to the value of our mill levy. So while I absolutely appreciate your logic and where this is coming from, I can't support it, but I thank you for bringing it up in best faith. Any other comments? Anne Marie?
Nelson.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Benson.
No.
Goldenberg.
Yes.
Johnson.
No.
Knutson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Boyd.
No. Motion carried?
3-5.
Thank you. GP2E. This change in GP2E is as a response to a suggestion that was presented to the board and to governance that we change the way we approach the item of debriefing that has traditionally been at the end of our agenda, and actually before that it used to be after the adjournment. So since the governance committee discussed this and is recommending that in the future, since discussions about debriefing and when we're actually calling our peers' behavior or errors or what might have you that would have occurred during a board meeting might be better handled through a private conversation with the president, as is already laid out in our policies. So what's coming before you tonight is to simply remove the reference to debriefing that's on page 2 of our policies from that policy. And I would entertain a motion.
I move that we adjust policy GP2E as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Anne Marie, please. Oh, I'm sorry, John.
You know, again, this isn't a real big deal, but I personally like the idea of a placeholder where we can revisit in an informal way at the end of a formal meeting process. And we don't really have that otherwise. We don't have a space or a place to say, well, how did we handle that? Was our procedure proper? Were we parliamentarily on target and task? Could we improve upon it? Or are there suggestions for how to visit this, revisit, do this in the future? I just absolutely wouldn't see any reason to take debriefing off of our annual, our regular meeting schedule. But that's just me.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Anne Marie, please.
Strand.
No.
Benson.
No.
Goldenberg.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Boyd.
No. Motion carries. Excuse me, monitoring of EL 15. Thank you for everyone for replying to this. Anyone have any question or any comments to make? This was fairly straightforward. I would entertain a motion to receive and file it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion. Any comments or questions? Anne Marie, please.
Benson.
Sorry, I lost my spot. We're on monitoring, right? Yes.
Yes.
Goldenberg.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes. Motion carries. That brings us to our reports. First in front of you is our packet, and I want to really thank Anne Marie and her team for getting this ready and printed out for us tonight so that we can take it home in its printed form. We don't have to have another batch ready for us, so bring this with you on Friday. You've seen the topics. This will be a long day of some pretty intense work, and I just urge you to go through the materials as best you can ahead of time. Jim, you have some elements that you're going to be kind of leading us through. Is there anything you want to say at this point?
Well, just a couple of heads up. Please take the time, like, before Friday morning, preferably by like noon on Thursday, to read through the Standard of Efforts report. And if you have something that doesn't make sense or that you need some clarification on, please either contact Brock or myself, and we'll try to at least enlighten you to what we think the data points were that were being shared there. But I would also ask, as you're reading through that, if you think of other things that might be beneficial in the future for comparative data, to make notes of that, and please get it to me, because long after the retreat, Planning Committee will be working with this, with the administration, to really look at philosophical recommendations that we might want to consider as a board about building future budgets, especially if we end up in a long-term frozen state on the local revenue side of things. So as you're reading through it, if you have an aha moment, boy, I just wonder what that is compared to Bismarck, just jot it down or send me a quick email on it so I can keep those in a pile, and planning can go to work on seeing what data we can actually get from other districts. Not everything we dream up is available through DPI, but Brock and his team, I suspect Anne Marie as well, are pretty good at sweet-talking other districts out of data when we need it. So we've been fortunate to be able to compare most things that we've dreamt up so far. The other thing I just wanted to highlight a little bit, and I'll briefly talk about it, I guess, when we get to the reports on committees. We're going to be looking at that long-range facility plan update that Brock alluded to, that Jeff has been working on. at our second meeting, I believe in January, that's coming back to us. But we're going to have a discussion at the retreat just in terms of some of the components of that may have to do with acquisition of future school sites. So that's really what the placeholder is here for the long-range facility plan update. But read that standard of effort report at least once. My fourth time through was when I finally had all the thoughts actually kind of gel together in my brain. It's kind of like Jell-O. It has to sit in the fridge for a while, I think, to really firm up.
Thank you. Robin?
So just an observation. Thank you, planning, for doing all this work, and I'm really looking forward to the report. And I know that our GPs are written a certain way to assign certain committees certain tasks, but this kind of looks like the Jim Johnson show. And so maybe this is something in the future. I would consider this undertaking an initiative, and maybe this is something that could be separately appointed to a different committee in the future, projects of this scope.
I just got to make sure I don't get credit for something that Dr. Schatz did. The bulk of this work was put together by Dr. Schatz and his team. Planning's using it just as one of the tools that we're using in our process of trying to figure out what can we do going forward from a planning perspective if 1/3 of our revenue remains frozen. So I'm not going to take credit for this pretty document at all. Although I've been adding to it with ideas, and Brock and Dr. Schatz have been kind enough to take most of those and try to embed them in it. So, but thank you.
Robin?
Thank you for the clarification. So will you be presenting primarily at the retreat, or will Dr. Schatz on this topic?
I think I'll probably introduce it, and then I think Jeff will have lots to say.
Okay.
That's up to him.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think everything here, I think out of courtesy, it's simply introduced by a board member, and usually whoever is chair of the committee that particular document is coming out of. So similarly with Rebecca bringing forth recommendations from communications. So, and we didn't have 4 different big documents coming out of communications, thank heavens, so that's good. So thank you, and I'm sure I am anticipating that this retreat will follow the pattern of others where an item will be introduced, staff will kind of present it in detail, and then after that, it's discussion and usually more informal than at a formal board meeting. So, any other questions on Friday's retreat or the agenda? Okay. Committee reports. Paul, why don't you start, please?
Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. Robin?
Governmental Affairs may be meeting next Thursday morning. I will notify Anne Marie and Jolynn tomorrow morning with agenda items if there is a need to meet.
Thank you. Dinah?
The only thing I have is that at the last Fargo Public Schools Foundation meeting, which I wasn't at, there was a request for judges for the next DECA competition of the foundation board, and I got an email today, and they're still short of judges, and they're asking us to broaden the request, so I'm broadening the request. I printed out a couple of, I don't have a copy for everybody, but I printed out 3 copies of the flyer that they sent. It's January 25th. It's a Monday evening. It's at the West Fargo High School, and it's a regional DECA competition. And I've been assured that you don't need to be a business person. And so I'm one of the volunteer judges, and they need at least a dozen more. So if any of you are interested and available, I believe the contact information is on there, but if it's not, let me know by phone or email, and I'll forward you more information so that you can volunteer accordingly. And if you have any other questions, just let me know afterwards.
Thank you. Rebecca, please.
I understand the calendar committee will be meeting the end of January, right? For our first meeting to look at the 2017-18 school year, so that'll be interesting. And yesterday, the Communications Committee met to finalize the recommendations based on the communications audit that we will be bringing to the retreat on Friday. And so again, those are based on 3 areas of our communications with the community, staff, and with ourselves. So we saved paper. Yes, we don't have the big, long documents to pass out to you today, but we'll have some information for you on Friday that has been carefully crafted. And as we discussed yesterday, basically they're action items that can serve as a communications plan. So it's basically a plan in action. Some items still to be carried forth this year, but quite a few that we'll look at for going on our planning for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Jim?
As I mentioned earlier, planning met. We've actually covered most of what planning dealt with in the bond resolutions. We talked a little bit about possible land acquisition for sites long into the future as the city's growth plan is developing. And we took our first really brief view of the Standard of Efforts report. And our next planning meeting will be the first Friday in February at 7:30. And you're all invited to it.
Thank you. I don't have a written report tonight. Obviously, governance met, set the agenda, brought this policy item forward, and also discussed, it's just on the tip of my tongue.
Board election?
Board election, thank you. So the information for potential candidates is on the website and has been updated, and so thanks to Anne Marie for that. I did attend the City of Fargo Community Development Committee last week, and we approved the community service budget to and housing development budget to be sent to the City Commission. So that's it for my report. Are there any other reports, John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we all knew this a long time ago, but Dinah's birthday was yesterday, and we've been away from each other for a while. So happy belated birthday to you, Dinah, and I hope it was a great one and it's a great year for you as well. And also I make note of some of our other key staff people, of course, and some are not always here, but at the board itself with us. But Betsy Beaton's birthday is January 18th. So if you bump into her and get a chance to give her your wishes, by all means.
Thank you. Our next meeting is our next, after the retreat, our next regular meeting is January 26th. We are at our final debriefing. Any final thoughts, John?
And it is our final debriefing. A couple of thoughts on my mind, like tonight and ongoing. This is just a minor little detail, but I would just like to see us use full names of people on the agenda when we have presenters. Sometimes the last names, I sometimes don't know them, and I have not as easy a time registering who they are, and sometimes you don't know if they're a male or female, even just by the last name. So just a minor note for people like me, that I wouldn't mind seeing when we have staff and other presenters just to itemize their full name for clarity's sake. And that's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You're talking about written in, like up here on our agenda.
Exactly.
I would echo that. That
Where
would
I
be
see
helpful.
Shu, Wanzik, Baki, Free.
Yep.
You know.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. We're adjourned. Oh, sorry. Oh, I didn't see.
Sorry, Madam President. Just briefly, I wanted to mention for those of you who are not able to join us for dinner, and I only do this because you have interaction, we do have a new Nutrition Services Director. Some of you met Cindy Hoganson this evening. Deb Labor's last official day with us was yesterday. Again, not typical that we introduce all new hires, but I know with the board picnic and the board dinners and things of that nature, you have times to interact with the Director of Nutrition Services. So Cindy Hoganson joined us officially yesterday. She comes to us as a former assistant director from Concordia College, and we're very excited to have her on board. And I know some of you introduced yourself to her, and you'll have chances to meet her as we go forward too. Thank you.
Thank you, Brock. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Thanks, we are adjourned.